More of those stories on the way. Want to update you on one that we brought you last Tuesday. We reported that a fire engineer responsible for assessing the safety of hundreds of blocks of flats following the Grenfell Tower fire was suspended and under investigation by his professional body. Liberal Democrat MP for Surrey Heath, Dr Al Pinkerton, spoke to us, said he wanted people to get in touch if they have what's known as an EWS1 form filled in by the assessor Adam Kiziak and the company Trifire.
Constituents have been in contact with me to say that they're being put through the ringer because they're trying to either buy or sell apartments in blocks that do have external cladding on them where an EWS1 form is required, and those sales have been held up because the form that they have for their building has been signed by Adam Kiziak, who has been sanctioned by the Institute of Fire Engineers, and therefore they've been unable to, in one case, buy an apartment because the lender, I think it was in that case Nationwide or NatWest, was unwilling to lend because that EWS form was not accepted because it was from this suspended fire safety engineer. So this is having direct implications for residents in my patch, and this will be the case all across Surrey. And that adds huge stress to an already incredibly stressful system of buying and selling your apartment. So what I was encouraging my constituents to do is to frankly be forewarned and forearmed. And if they are considering a sale in particular, to have a look through their documentation related to their building and to check whether the EWS1 form that they have related to their building has been signed by this chap, Adam Kiziak. Because if it has been, then the banks at the moment and the mortgage lenders will not accept that form as evidence of the fire worthiness of the building.
Well, lawyers acting for Trifire told BBC Radio Surrey that Mr Kiziak's suspension from the Institution of Fire Engineers has been extended pending investigation. They say that suspension does not prevent him from working. Well, now Mr Kiziak has been accused of using a fellow professional's credentials and signature without their knowledge. HSBC have confirmed they're the third major lender after Nationwide and NatWest to refuse to offer mortgages for flats in buildings where Mr Kiziak has carried out the safety survey. He denies any wrongdoing. Phil Hendry has this report.
Sam Island has started flat hunting all over again. The fire safety certificate required for the apartment he wanted to buy had been signed by Adam Kiziak, a suspended fire engineer. He's been investigated for malpractice. Sam's lender pulled his mortgage offer as a result.
It makes you feel completely powerless. It's just some opaque part of the system that I didn't even know was there. It's just scuppered the whole thing.
This is where Sam wanted to have his first home. Anyone selling here will now need a new certificate, known as an EWS1, introduced after the Grenfell Tower fire. Adam Kiziak and his firm Trifire are being investigated by the Institution of Fire Engineers for, among other things, failing to meet the IFE's standards for honesty, integrity and accuracy. Being suspended doesn't prevent Mr Kiziak from working. In December, his company issued a fire safety certificate for these flats behind me in central London. Only he didn't sign the paperwork. It's claimed he used the credentials and signature of another fire engineer.
Upset? Really angry?
He's a Wal Salisu based in Saudi Arabia. From there, he told me he had agreed to peer review Mr Kiziak's work on some buildings, but then says he found his signature being used without his permission on ones he knew nothing about.
Personally, I am very angry about it. I've had sleepless nights. It's lack of professional integrity, which is very important when you work within the safety industry.
Mr Salisu says he always uses an electronic signature on documents he signs, like this one. This, he claims, is one sent out by Mr Kiziak without his consent. Same name, no electronic tag. Adam Kiziak, hello, Phil Hendry from the BBC.
Sorry,
I'd like a word with you, please, about your suspension from the IFE.
I can't comment, I'm afraid, but if you give me your contact details, I can get in touch with you.
I have sent you my contact details.
OK.
Having tried to reach Mr Kiziak by phone and email without reply, we put Mr Salisu's claims to him. You've stolen someone else's identity, taken their signature and continued working when you've been suspended. Why have you done that?
I'm not able to comment, I'm afraid.
Subsequently, Mr Kiziak's lawyers told us any allegation of fraudulent activity is strenuously denied. Mr Kiziak and Tri-Fire are very sorry for any distress and the difficulties that the current situation may have caused. For people like Sam, that distress and those difficulties include more expense and delays, with HSBC joining NatWest and Nationwide in rejecting Mr Kiziak's surveys. He's done several hundred. Buying and selling a flat in Britain just got even harder.
Well, I'm going to bring in Dr. Al Pinkerton again. We spoke a week ago. He's the Lib Dem MP for Surrey Heath. Al, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, James.
7 days on, where's this story moved for you?
Well, the story has moved a long way since we last spoke. First of all, Phil Hendry did his fantastic report that we've just heard. That came out last week, and that has really cast a whole new light on this story. It's really opened up a whole new chapter. So last week I talked to you about Adam Kiziak, the fact that this person had been sanctioned by the IFE, the fact that he has signed many thousands of these EWS1 forms, and also that banks had stopped lending on them. And that story itself, when it first went out last week, generated a huge number of emails to me from my own residents, from residents across Surrey. And indeed, your story travelled far and wide, because I have received emails from all across the country with examples of EWS1 forms signed by Adam Kiziak. But really troublingly, after that Phil Hendry story that we've just heard, where allegations of fraudulent misuse of somebody else's identity, this other fire engineer, Awal Salazu, and the fact that Tri-Fire borrowed without his knowledge his signature, I've had examples in Surrey Heath and indeed elsewhere in Surrey, like Woking, of not only Adam Kiziak signing a form, but then a new form being reissued in the name of Awal Salazu. So we have examples of Phil Hendry's story happening in our community right now.
Right, I'm just going to say we had to say that is alleged as well, Al, because we can't be...
It is alleged.
Yeah, alleged at the moment. Let's just clarify that. Look, you were at the Public Accounts Committee's inquiry into cladding yesterday, and, well, you probably sat through hours of that. What did you take away from it?
Well, I did sit through hours of it. I'm not on Public Accounts Committee, so I sat there as a member of the public and therefore unable to speak. And I have to say, I was incredibly disappointed. Only one mention of Adam Kiziak and Tri-Fire came up, and that was by one of the witnesses who was presenting yesterday, which I thought was hugely disappointing. I mean, this is one of the most significant new chapters in the building safety scandal, and the committee seemed remarkably unaware of it. And yet this is having a horrific effect on residents who, as we heard last week, are unable to sell apartments because banks have stopped lending to potential buyers on their apartments. So I'll be writing to the Public Accounts Committee today on behalf of those residents who've been affected to make sure that this is on their agenda for their next meeting, and hopefully even that they might be able to organise an exceptional meeting and bring some of the civil servants who were there back in. But one of the things that we did hear yesterday was that there's a real understanding of the possibility of fraud in this sector. And civil servants from MHCLG, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, acknowledged that there has been extensive fraud in the building remediation sector. And I mean, frankly, I really do think that institutions like the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors and the Institute of Fire Engineers, they really need to ask very tough questions of themselves. And frankly, they need to have tough questions asked of them about what role that they played in allowing this to happen, but also the government itself. The EWS1 form and that whole process was so ripe for abuse right from the outset that it really wasn't up to scratch from day one. And that's allowed people like Adam Kiziak, who has been sanctioned, remember, by the IFE already for known breaches, and situations like this alleged situation with Awal Salazu to emerge. Personally, I think these allegations are serious, and I think, frankly, we now need a police inquiry, because if you have allegations of fraudulent misuse of somebody else's identity, with all of the financial implications of that, then I think the very best people to determine whether there's a case to be heard here are the police themselves.
I appreciate you coming on. I suppose, look, what we should say is at the core of this is there's people trying to buy flats and people trying to sell them.
Well, that's exactly right. And I have examples, again, in my constituency of people who are trying to sell their apartments who have now been prevented from doing that. And the building management companies having to effectively go through a whole new process of commissioning a new EWS1 form. And then, of course, the survey that sits behind that. Now, that's not a cheap, and it's not necessarily a quick process. It can take weeks, months. Fire engineers are not readily available, and it can cost in tens of thousands of pounds. So who pays for that? Well, the poor residents who have already paid once for a form that no longer is acceptable, and they're now having to pay again. Plus, also, they're potentially risking losing a buyer because of the delays that are being put into the process.
Appreciate you coming on this morning, Dr. Al Pinkerton, the Lib Dem MP for Surrey Heath. And we should say that Adam Kiziak has apologised for any distress that he may have caused. He strenuously denies any fraudulent behaviour. Somebody else who's going to have a thought on this is Jennifer Frame from the End Our Cladding Scandal, which is a campaign focused on cladding and building safety. Jennifer, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I take it you live in a block with cladding, do you?
Well, actually, my block of flats burnt down in a fire 5 years ago, so my situation's a little bit different.
Wow.
And I think that adds to this in that, I absolutely agree with everything that Al Pinkerton has just said, but it's beyond just being able to buy and sell a home. That's really serious. That affects people's ability to move on with their lives. But it's also about, can people trust the safety of these professional assessments which say whether their home is safe or not? That's really important.
Right, given the doubt that's been cast on the EWS1 forms in this case that we've spoken about, what does that say about the whole process then?
Well, I think it's really important to say that, action has to be taken on specific cases that are brought forward like this, but that actually the Grenfell inquiry report, which came out 6 months ago, and obviously that process has been going on for a few years, it's been laid bare in, I think it's 1,700 pages of that report, that the issues there are really systemic and cultural across the industry. It's not just a case of a few bad actors, actually. For decades, there's been poor practice, sometimes deception in the industry, and also, poor oversight from government. So I think we need to start from the perspective that whatever is done to fix these problems has to be sort of system-wide and sort of able to pick up the sort of grip that we need, that's a sort of firm oversight from the government to make sure these issues cannot happen. It's not just a single issue. And I think it actually starts with the fact that the standards need to be really clear and consistent. And that's up to the government. Actually, I think, Al Pinkerton mentioned there the role of the government. And part of it is making sure there's real consistency in the standards that are expected, that, it's really clear inside and out a building what's safe and what's not. And at the moment, the standards allow far too much subjective interpretation from engineers. And that's really sort of putting a risk on people, whether they can trust those engineers or not, and whether there are bad actors that come in and make decisions that are in the self-interest of the people that commission those reports.
Look, appreciate you coming on. I suppose government is where this points to, but also, as Al Pinkerton just said, I suppose you've got the Institution of Fire Engineers. They say that they've got an investigation. Al mentioned the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. It's almost like you're saying everyone needs to have a good look at this.
Well, the thing is actually both of those bodies, the IFE and RICS, have brought out statements in the last couple of days, and they're very hands-off. They really push the problem back and sort of say, not our problem. The IFE actually put out a statement saying that this particular firm that you're talking about this morning should be engaging the mortgage lenders themselves to clear up these problems. That's not the answer to this issue. We need, one strong central body that's going to have that firm oversight. We say never again on anniversaries of Grenfell. The politicians all come out and say that. And yet, where is the grip and oversight to make sure that this isn't happening? So we need really clear standards of what it takes to be a fire engineer who's capable of doing these fire assessments, really clear standards set by the government to say what's acceptable for the remediation standard of our homes so that people know when their homes are safe. And we need, extra support in bringing in some skills and capacity into the fire engineering industry to make sure that we have that level of skill and competence and confidence that we need in the whole system.
Jennifer, appreciate you coming on. I suspect you and I might be talking again in the future about this, don't you?
I hope so. Thank you very much.
Well, yeah, it's one of those stories. I know we're going to talk about it, but you rather wish we didn't have to, really. We did contact the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, but are yet to hear back from them. The government recently announced plans to speed up the process of getting the thousands of tower blocks with flammable cladding and fire safety defects fixed. And once again, I should report and repeat, I should say, that Adam Kiziak has apologised for any distress that he may have caused and strenuously denies any fraudulent behaviour. It is BBC Radio Surrey. Are you maybe trying to buy a flat? Do you live in an apartment block which has cladding? Is this the first time you've heard about this story? We'd like to hear from you.